Now let's talk about testing and validation. This part of any business really is one of the most crucial steps in making sure that you are successful in your endeavor. Testing and validation is what primarily determines whether a business is going to be successful or not. And so this Amazon selling business is no different. We need to set up a time and a process for testing and validating whether people even want your product. So let's look at exactly how we're going to do that. You know, the purpose of testing and validation, number one, is to see if people even want your product. You can come up with the best product idea that you can think of, find a great source for it, but if nobody wants it, it's going to be a waste of time. And it happens all the time. People come up, they get emotionally they believe that everyone's going to want and love their product. But the only way you will know is if you throw your product out into the marketplace and that people buy it with cold, hard cash. So another purpose of testing and validation is to get accustomed to the process. I told you before that there will be a learning curve, but the more you get accustomed to the process of selling on Amazon, the more easier it becomes and the more efficient you are and effective at it as you are as well. You know how to avoid the problems, you set up better systems, and next thing you know, you're making all types of money on Amazon selling products. Another purpose of testing and validation is to see what listings, advertising that you do works and what does not. Again, you never know if it works until people start paying for it or they start buying based on your ad, but you won't know unless you test it. And then you can keep tweaking and changing until you find the right ad that continues to help more and more people or motivate them to buy from you. Next one, to identify any problems and issues, bottlenecks, or in the process that you follow. In other words, that you want to make sure to identify if there are any things that are going to stop or prevent you from a streamlined process in getting your products out to customers, getting products out to customers and keeping them happy. To get feedback also is another reason that we test and validate. Because again, we're making a lot of assumptions. We assume that people are going to want our product. We assume that people are going to pay the prices we're asking for our product. We assume that people are not going to return our product. We're assuming that people are going to be satisfied with every feature and benefit of that product. That's a lot of assumption. That's why it's important to test and validate to find out the answers to our assumptions. Are people satisfied or will they be satisfied with the product? So the best thing to do is to always try to test it on people before before you put it in the marketplace, or as you put it in the marketplace, use these few beginning customers as your test subjects. Again, to improve on your customer satisfaction. So let's talk about testing and validation. There are two parts to testing and validation. Number one is testing the product in the marketplace, like finding out again if people even want this product. And number two is testing your entire process. Once you start selling it, the entire process from sourcing, identifying the product, sourcing the product, selling the product, making sure the customer is happy with the product, pricing the product, all these things, that's your entire process. You want to test to make sure it's running effectively and efficiently. Let's talk about testing your product in the marketplace, the process. Well, this is the process that I follow that tends to be very effective for me. It starts with ordering 5 to 10 units to test in the marketplace. Well, we talked about before, you sampled and tested the product itself first to make sure that it was legitimate, it was high quality, and you can sell it. Now you need to test that samples or that unit in the marketplace. So the best amount to try to work with is anywhere between 5 and 10 units. If you can sell 5, then that is a good chance that more and more people will want to buy your product. If you can't sell 5, then you know that people will probably not want to buy your product. So I try to order maybe 5 to 10 units first from the wholesale source and let them know the reason you're doing it. So that way he'll feel good about it. And then test it in the marketplace and see if you can sell any. And if you do, then great. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, you definitely need to start with a preliminary Amazon listing to test your advertising. So using all the different criteria we mentioned before about putting together an Amazon listing, put together a preliminary listing. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go through all the process of doing the Photoshop and all the things I mentioned, but just try something. And like in other words, get a great list of pictures, the best title you can come up with, best descriptions, put it out there in the marketplace and keep tweaking it little by little until you find the one that really resonates with customers. Also, too, you get your preliminary packaging to fulfill and test orders. Granted, it won't be the fancy packaging with your logo on it, but it'll be something that's nice that you can start to test the process of getting the orders, packaging the orders, sending out the orders to your customers, and making sure your customers are happy. So yeah, so in other words, getting the preliminary packaging is also a great way to test how good or how fast or how quickly or how good you can do that. And also your ability to fulfill on orders. How quickly do you fulfill on your orders? How quickly do you get the packaging together, ship it out, the entire process, and your customer being happy? Uh, all that together, it's going to be important for you to test. And also your inserts. What are you going to put in the package? What are you going to put? Whether product materials, whether free bonuses, etc. You're going to be testing all that process um, in the marketplace. And also, too, the other thing you're going to be testing too is again getting feedback from your customers to test your value. In other words, ask your first couple customers who bought your product why they liked your product. Did they like your product? What didn't they like about your product? In other words, be very specific, and they'll be glad to tell you because they want a great product. And then after it's all said and done, if they really liked your product, ask them for reviews. Then you got to test your process, and that's the entire process from beginning to end. We talked about testing your product quality. How do we do that? By sampling. In other words, getting samples from the wholesale source. Testing your sourcing process. You know, getting those. And we're going to talk about more specific on all these. How do you test your product? Uh, but the process of sourcing is very crucial. So you have to make sure you test it and run through the whole thing first to make sure it's going to flow smoothly. Testing your Amazon product listing. We talked about that. The marketing. Testing your product value, the price that you use. Testing your customer satisfaction process, the feedback that you get, the reviews that you get. We're going to have to test every one of these things. Why? Because you want to make sure you have the best possible chance to succeed. So let's talk about testing your product, the sampling. And again, order samples before you sell. Make sure that your wholesale source will send you the sample. Now, again, I mentioned before about waiting, and this is where one of the biggest and toughest parts for a lot of entrepreneurs. Because think about it, it'll take you 7 days maybe to get the sample from your overseas wholesale source. Then you have to test it for a couple of days. Then you have to reorder some actual 5 to 10 samples to actual units to test. That's another 7 days. You name it. You're looking at about maybe 3 weeks before you actually have the product out selling. I don't like that because I like to get products out selling as fast as possible. But unfortunately, that is the process, and you need to test it. Granted, you can cut corners here and there. When I mean by cut corners, I mean cutting your time by utilizing different systems or different techniques. But you can expect anywhere between 7 to 21 days until you actually have your product in the marketplace, because you have to make sure that you test your samples. In that testing of samples, test your product for quality. Is it made of the best materials? Durability, is it going to last? Or if you push it too hard, does it break? User friendliness, is it easy to use? Remember, your customers are driven by convenience, so you want to make sure that it's easy to use. Aesthetics, is it pleasing to the eye? I'm sorry, but a very practical product, but that doesn't look good, people won't buy, unfortunately, because they're looking for aesthetics as well. It's important to them. And then, of course, convenience. Is it compact, easy to carry, or bulky or hard? I mean, you have to make sure, but how do you know? By getting the product sent to you to test. Let's talk about testing your sourcing product. Now, a lot of this testing of your sourcing is going to come from your initial investigation for products and sourcing your products, but also by ordering ordering your first products. So that you want to test the process of ordering, paying, and receiving products from your wholesale source. One of the best ways to do that is by ordering your first 5 to 10 test products, and they should give you a better idea of how the whole process works. What do you want to look for? Well, you want to look for packaging. Did they send the package in a safe, protected package that will prevent breakage? How do I know this? Because I had one company send me, a company I was very excited about. All of a sudden, the first 5 to 10 units they sent, they were defective. The box was broken. They weren't packed very well. And I realized that was their standard of shipping me their product. And a good portion of the products were damaged, and I couldn't even sell them, and I lost my money. So you understand that shows something about that particular client or wholesale source. It shows that they didn't care enough to actually package it right. Then switch over to another wholesale source that I was looking at. Oh my gosh, everything came perfectly packaged right, protected, safe, perfect condition. All the units were great. And of course, they ended up being the wholesale source that I went with. So make sure that they're sending everything in the best most safe packaging to prevent breakage. Payments. Do they take PayPal? Of course, I try to only use wholesale sources that use PayPal. I at times use Western Union. If I trust them, of course I will. Um, Even a wire transfer, I'm willing to do that as well. But again, you want to protect yourself. One of the best ways to protect yourself is by using PayPal. Because unless you know them very well or trust them, Western Union, you can't get your money back. Wire transfers, you can't get your money back. PayPal, at least you can put in uh, that you have a problem with the actual sale, and they may be able to get your money back. Shipping, ask them, find out the process. What shipping company do they use, and can you trust them? The shipping company. The great thing is that there is such thing as FedEx in China and other overseas. UPS, of course, goes international too. DHL. There's a lot of different companies that do it. Um, I believe UPS does. I'll take it back if it doesn't. But I usually generally personally use FedEx or DHL. Granted, there is a company called EMS, and it's a Chinese company, sort of similar to FedEx. I do use them at times, maybe for a sample, but I will not use it for my actual units. Now, granted, sometimes that means paying a little bit more for FedEx. Why? Because everyone in EMS speaks Chinese. They have very limited um, opportunities or people who actually speak English. So if you want to communicate something goes wrong, you're going to have a hard time trying to get in touch with anyone. So if that's the case, I'd say go with the tried and true company that you know is going to do the job. FedEx has generally been there every time. I'm not saying they're not going to make mistakes, but I'm just saying you can trust them. More importantly, you can communicate with them to try to get help, and especially with tracking your packages, etc. Again, EMS is good. Sometimes, most of the time, they're cheaper, but don't let that fool you. If something goes wrong, you won't be able to get in touch with them, and then you'll be an unhappy camper. So shipping is very important. So find out what shipping company they're using. You need to test that. The resolution process. If an item comes damaged, like it did with me, how do they respond to your issue? When I told the person that the item was damaged, they responded with, "Hey, can you send me pictures?" Which is understandable, and I send them pictures. It still didn't seem like they really believed me. Um, that kind of showed me that that was the wrong company that I needed to deal with. So, of course, the resolution process. If an item comes damaged, how do they respond? Are they ready to quickly fix it, or are they making excuses, etc.? Now, we talked about testing your Amazon product listing. How do you test it? Well, test your titles by adding different benefits. Like keep changing, swapping out benefits for your title. That way to see which one really resonates with people. You even test the product name too. You can test that. I had a product name one time that was selling like hotcakes. All of a sudden, I created another product with a different name. It wasn't selling at all. It was a similar product, and I couldn't understand why. So what did I do? I took a similar name as the first one for the second product. So test your titles by adding and changing different things. Test your images by making changes on your images, swapping out images, or even rotating images. Because again, there's a main image and there's subsequent images. Hey, rotate them at different times to see what works better. How about your descriptions and your bullet points? Test your descriptions and bullet points by changing the 5 P's. The problem, the promise, the picture, the proof, the push. Hey, just swap out the picture, the benefits, or swap out the promise, make a different promise, etc. Test your bonuses. You tried one bonus, it didn't work, try another bonus. Tried one downloadable book, give them another one. Tried one accessory they didn't like, give them another accessory. In other words, keep testing until you align it with what the customer is looking for. Test multiple reviews versus few. Hey, if you're not selling, get a bunch of people to test it, review it, and all of a sudden see how it does. Keep going, add 10, 20, 40 reviews if you have to. Test each one to see which one works the best. Very important. Now, we talked about testing your product value through pricing. You want to test your pricing. I like to start with higher prices first and then go backwards. Because, of course, you want to find out what is that point where people feel comfortable spending for your product. Again, you try to improve the ad as best as you can, but you want them to spend the most money they can. So start high and then go backwards, okay, until you finally all of a sudden start getting sales, and you sort of get an idea of what your main selling kind of price ceiling is. I like even making price changes every few days just to test it. In one day you can tell if people are responding to your prices or not. A couple of days will probably give you a better picture. You could do it daily, but you'll see less accurate results. But give it a couple of days. Change the price one time, give it a couple of days, change it again, give it a couple days, keep changing until you see the increase in selling, in sales. Um, and also, too, what you'll also notice, which eventually we're going to talk about as well, is that people tend to buy more on certain days than others, buy on certain months than others, etc. Testing your customer satisfaction process. Contact your first few test customers and get their honest feedback. That's one of the best ways you can test it. And we'll talk about later how to message your customers through email, through Amazon messaging, to be able to contact them and get their input. Um, uh, Give them an incentive. That's a great way to get your feedback. Give them some type of incentive, an accessory of some sorts, a bonus of some sorts as an incentive that they will give you feedback. And they will, most of them look forward to it. Ask them about the product and the process. It's great about the product, but how was the process? How was your experience? Did you feel like you were taken care of? Do you feel happy? Do you feel like we really were concerned for your needs, that we looked out for you? And keep asking those kind of questions, because then you'll get the right answers, so that you can keep tweaking and tweaking until you get the right sort of business model that will continuously give you business over the long run. How about validation criteria? How do you know if you're passing these tests? Well, here's a couple. Sale validation. 5 sales, then you have a product that you can build a business around. If you can't get 5 sales, then forget it. You probably don't have a business that people are even interested in. It just means that your product was not viable. Many of those people didn't want it. So go out and look for another product and try it again. Price validation. I usually try to 2 or 3 sales at a certain price point. Helps me feel confident that I can keep it at that price point. 1 sale may be a fluke, or that one person who just, was splurging that day. 2 sales I feel better about. 3, 4, 5, then I got something that's hot. I got the right price point that'll work for me. Customer satisfaction validation. How do you know if customers are satisfied? 4 to 5 star reviews from verified purchasers. And verified purchasers are people who actually bought your product. That's how you know people are satisfied. They're actually proactively reviewing, and they're giving you 4 to 5 stars. Again, only 10% of people in Amazon customers actually review. So if you're getting 4 to 5 star reviews, then you know you're doing something right and the customers are happy with the product.